Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening. As she stepped out of the hotel, Aubrey's mind drew a blank. She had no idea what to do next. There was no way she could return to the mansion on the outskirts, as Lucian would definitely have it watched. The same could be said of the hotel. Feeling desperate, she gave Frida a call. The latter, who was already sound asleep, was woken up by the ringing of her phone. Just as she was about to end the call by reflex, she was jolted awake by a glimpse of the caller ID. It was then that a glint of annoyance flashed across her eyes. "Aubrey, when is she going to stop bugging me?" Upon regaining her composure, she answered, Aubrey, is there anything I can do for you?" Where are you now? Come to the hotel. I'm downstairs waiting for you. Remember, don't let anyone find out." The tension in Aubrey's voice couldn't be any more obvious. Her tone caused Frida's heart to inexplicably sink. Before she even replied, she had already gotten out of bed. What's wrong? Did something happen? Why do you want to see me?" she asked while getting dressed. Aubrey answered flatly, "They have evidence against me and have probably called the police too. That's why I've gone into hiding. If you lead anyone to me, I'll drag you down to hell with me." Frida froze as panic began to fill her eyes. Aubrey is on the run from the police. Should I help her now? What if I lead them to her? While she was hesitating, Aubrey's voice rang out again. If you don't show up, the first thing I'll do when I'm caught is to expose your crimes. When that happens, I can't guarantee what my tongue will let slip. If you cross me, I'll definitely make you suffer for it." Faced with the blatant threat, Frida lost her temper and snapped, "You better not cross the line." Aubrey snorted in response. You chose this path back then. It's too late for regrets now. You have 20 minutes. If I don't see you, you're going down with me." With that, Aubrey ended the call. As the call-end tone rang out from her phone, the furious Frida glowered insidiously. It was then that Corey's words began to echo in her mind. "If I had known this was going to happen, I would have worked with him that night." Unfortunately, it was too late for regrets now. Frida had no choice but to get herself ready and slip out of her room stealthily. To avoid her family's notice, she didn't even drive her car. Instead, she flagged down a taxi by the street to send her to the hotel. She knew the location well since she was the one who made the hotel reservation on Aubrey's behalf. By the time she arrived, 20 minutes had passed. There was also no sign of Aubrey anywhere. A sense of dread began to swell within her, and she scanned the surroundings anxiously. "I'm here." Aubrey's voice rang out from an inconspicuous alley. Given a fright, Frida took a few seconds to regain her composure before walking over. What's your plan?" She gave Aubrey a wary look. The last thing Aubrey had was a plan. "Anything will do as long as I can escape." Frida suggested unreservedly, "Fleeing overseas is your only option. If you stay in the country, the Farwell family will get you even if the police don't." "Overseas?" Aubrey seethed insidiously. If I leave, won't that batch, Roxanne, get what she wants? How can I do that before I have my revenge against her?" Sensing the insidious aura Aubrey was exuding, the tense Frida carefully persuaded the former. If you don't go and end up being captured by the police or the Farwell family, you will fall into even worse circumstances than you're currently in. When that happens, you can kiss vengeance goodbye." Frida didn't dare infuriate Aubrey given the latter's state of mind. Worried that Aubrey would go mad, Frida tried her best to calm her down. After all, it was also in her interest if Aubrey were to flee overseas. With that thought in mind, Frida suggested, "If you're worried about money, I can prepare it for you. Even though it isn't much, I can spare 10 to 20 million now that I have returned to the Queen family." Panic struck Aubrey when she heard of the fate that awaited her. Nevertheless, she was reluctant to let Roxanne go just like that. Gritting her teeth, she replied, "There has to be another way." Meanwhile, Lucian was looking displeased in his study at the Farwell residence. Let it go. The police will think of something. You should grab a bite first, Roxanne advised Lucian softly despite the anxiety she felt after learning of Aubrey's refusal to meet. Since Catalina had served the food a while ago, it would soon grow cold if left untouched. However, Lucian furrowed his brows as a murderous intent began to swell within him. If Aubrey dares to cause any more trouble, I'll definitely. Although she couldn't tell what was on his mind, Roxanne could feel the sudden tension in the room. She got up to hold his arm and lead him to the couch. Thereafter, she brought the food that was served to him. Staring at Roxanne, Lucian cast aside his frustrations and relished the attention she was showering him. Just as both of them were sharing a quiet meal, a knock on the door was heard. Catalina's voice subsequently rang out. "A Mr. and Mrs. Farwell are here." Roxanne stopped what she was doing in response to Catalina's words. Looking at Lucian, she spoke hesitantly. "You should go down. I'll wait for you here." She had no intention of seeing Sonia unless it was necessary. However, Lucian calmly finished the food she served before getting up from the couch. He replied in a deep voice, "We'll head down together. She'll have to accept you and the kids sooner or later." Giving her no choice, he grabbed her wrist and led her out of the study. Roxanne finally relented because she found no real reason to protest. Upon descending the staircase together, they saw the two figures sitting on the couch. Sonia was evidently outraged, her chest heaving vigorously. Elias, with an equally grave expression, was trying his best to calm her down. Further infuriated by the unexpected sight of Roxanne, Sonia jumped to her feet. "Why are both of you together at this hour?" When Elias saw Roxanne, he nodded to greet her. Roxanne reciprocated with a polite nod before returning her gaze to the furious Sonia. Just as she was about to reply, Lucian preempted her. "There's nothing wrong with us being together. Instead, I'm more curious as to what both of you are doing here at this hour." Sonia turned toward Elias, hoping that he would say something. When he saw the look in his wife's eye, Elias explained in resignation. Why did you call the police so late at night?" "The police chief just informed me about it." "What's going on?" Sonia fixed Roxanne with a cold-eyed stare, clearly suspecting that Lucian had caused a commotion because of her. Lucian stepped between his mother and Roxanne protectively, then led the latter downstairs and made her sit in the armchair while he stood beside her. "I wouldn't have bothered the police at such a late hour, but I caught a woman named Ophelia Smith trying to pour lubricant over the brakes on Roxanne's car this afternoon. Had I not discovered what she was doing, I'm afraid Roxanne and the children could be dead by now." Sonia's expression changed. "What? Didn't that person know Estella would be riding in that car too?" Lucian's tone turned grave as he replied, "She knew, of course. After all, the mastermind behind it all is Aubrey." "What did you say?" Sonia was so enraged that she lost her balance and staggered backward into Elias. He immediately helped her to the couch, then asked, "What's going on? How can you be sure that it was Aubrey's doing? Hasn't she learned her lesson after her family's fall from grace?" Lucian nodded indifferently. "I'm also curious why she's still so incorrigible after her family's downfall and keeps pestering Roxanne and the children." His response confirmed to his parents that Aubrey had orchestrated the whole thing. Nodding, Elias said, "If that's the case, she deserves to be arrested. In fact, she should have been arrested after what happened previously." However, Sonia was still a little doubtful. "Aubrey's? I'm sure you've seen the photos of her in a robe at a hotel. Isn't that enough to tell you what sort of person she is? Now that the situation has already come to a head, do you still think she couldn't have done such things? How long are you going to let her hoodwink you?" Lucian's voice grew a few notches colder, and a hint of anger flashed in his eyes as he looked at his mother. Sonia looked away, recalling how she felt when she had seen those photos. "He's right. Aubrey's a liar. But," narrowing his eyes, Lucian suddenly said, "If you still don't believe it, You can always call and ask her to come over so that you can confront her face to face. Roxanne caught on almost at once. Aubrey is backed into a corner now. If Sonia calls her, she'll surely see Sonia as a lifeline and come to meet Sonia. As the realization dawned on her, Roxanne could not help feeling somewhat nervous. She desperately hoped that Sonia would agree and lure Aubrey out naturally. Sonia looked uncertain as she gazed at Lucian, then at the woman behind him. If you're worried, why don't you just call and ask? Elias urged her. Only then did Sonia take her phone from her handbag, pull up Aubrey's number, and make the call. Meanwhile, Aubrey was fretting like a cat on a hot tin roof, unable to come up with a single solution. When she saw Sonia's call, she instantly fell back to her habit of thinking of Sonia as her lifesaver and hurriedly answered it. Mrs. Farwell, you've got to help me," as she cried out in a tearful voice. Hearing that, Sonia felt her heart lurch as she realized everything Lucian had said was true. Nonetheless, she still harbored a trace of pity for Aubrey in her heart. She asked, "Was it really you who put Ophelia Smith up to it?" Aubrey sobbed, "I know it was my fault, Mrs. Farwell. I lost all rationale for a while. Please help me. I won't do it ever again." Although Aubrey did not admit to it directly, her apology could be considered an indirect confirmation that she had instigated Ophelia's actions. Utterly disappointed, Sonia said flatly, "For how could I have trusted someone as heartless as you all these years?" Hearing the indifference in her voice, Aubrey quickly explained, I swear that's the only thing I lied to you about, and it was because I was too madly in love with Lucian. You understand that, don't you? I promise I'll never do it again." Sonia was infuriated by her words. That's the only thing you lied about? You don't think that's enough, do you? You nearly killed my granddaughter." Although they were only speaking over the phone, a shiver ran down Aubrey's spine. She began sobbing even harder. I was wrong. I'll even prostrate myself and apologize to Essie if you want. Please forgive me this time. Have you forgotten? You said you'd only acknowledge me as your daughter-in-law. I won't marry Lucian anymore, so please ask him to show me mercy." Sonia was already fuming over the fact that Aubrey had deceived her. However, seeing that the latter had dared to bring up what she had said in the past, she was absolutely livid. Get over here and apologize to Essie, then." All of a sudden, Aubrey fell silent. "Get on my hands and knees before that little kid and apologize? How can I do that? Besides, won't Lucian know if I go back there? Where will I run then?" The silence caused Sonia's voice to turn even icier as she said, I'm giving you one last chance. Come back and explain everything clearly to my face. If you don't even have the guts to meet me, there's nothing left for us to say." Aubrey clenched her jaw and ended the call without uttering a single word. What happened, Aubrey?" Frida, who had been watching Aubrey on the phone, felt uneasy. "The outcome that'd be the most favorable for me is if Aubrey were to leave the country and flee as far away as possible. If Sonia agrees to help Aubrey, however, my plan will fail, and Aubrey will end up remaining in the country and continuing to be a nuisance to me." Aubrey clutched her phone so tightly that her hand shook. That old hag. She's in cahoots with that batch. She wants me to go back. Does she take me for a fool?" After saying that, she gritted her teeth and turned to Frida. You mentioned going abroad. How do we go about that?" Still looking a little troubled, Frida replied, I can get the money ready, but if you're to leave with things as they are now, it'll be quite difficult to send you off without the Farwells finding out." Feeling defeated, Aubrey slumped against the wall. I'm done for. The Pearsons used to have many friends among the other prestigious families. Is there really no one who could help you? Try and think again, Frida urged, visibly anxious. Let me think, Aubrey mumbled. Back in the Farwell residence living room, Sonia remained shaken for a long while. It's only now that I'm finally seeing Aubrey's true colors. How could I have been so blind? How could I have trusted someone like that? She shook her head in deep regret. I even entertained the thought that Aubrey would probably turn over a new leaf after what happened to her family and would be a suitable candidate for my daughter-in-law. Now, I've no choice but to admit I fell for the same person's trickery twice." Lucian had expected her response, and he did not press for details. He merely asked, how did it go? Is she willing to meet with you?" Still looking a little troubled, Frida replied, "I can get the money ready, but if you're to leave with things as they are now, it'll be quite difficult to send you off without the Farwells finding out." Not wanting to say anything further, Sonia simply shook her head with a gloomy expression. The fact that she had been tricked by someone like Aubrey was humiliating enough. She was not about to admit it in front of Roxanne. Lucian and Roxanne exchanged solemn glances when they saw her response. "What do you plan on having the police do to her?" Elias asked. They will handle her accordingly based on what she did. However, we don't know where Aubrey is right now, so we'll need to find her before we even worry about that," Lucian replied coldly. Sonia frowned the moment she heard that. Why didn't you tell me about this sooner? I wouldn't have taken that tone with her if you had told me about it. Had I known about this sooner, I would have pretended to care about Aubrey and tricked her into coming back." Of course, Lucian knew what Sonia had in mind. She's extremely cautious. I only told you to call her to test her out, so I wasn't expecting much to begin with. Realizing that Sonia was about to get mad again, Elias quickly stood up and pulled her into his arms. "Your mother and I will leave you two alone now that we know what's going on. Just give me a call if you ever need anything. As for Aubrey, I'll have our men continue searching for her. I'll go see Gina and Samuel again and tell them to talk some sense into Aubrey. Hopefully, they'll be able to convince her to surrender," Sonia said coldly after forcefully suppressing her anger. Feeling relieved that she was finally starting to understand, Lucian flashed her a smile and nodded in acknowledgement. "You two should get some rest too," Elias reminded them after walking Sonia to the door. Lucian arched an eyebrow at him in response. Got it. Be careful on the road." Sonia waited until they were inside the car before expressing her guilt and regret. How could I have missed all the signs? I can't believe Aubrey is so cruel and heartless. Our poor granddaughter suffers a lot as is, and yet, Aubrey still targeted her anyway." Elias turned to look at her after slowly starting the car. "That's why I told you not to interfere with Lucian's affairs." Sonia frowned and was about to say something in response, but Elias retracted his gaze as he continued. Why do you think Lucian chose not to marry her after all these years? Why do you think Essie still refuses to accept her?" Sonia opened her mouth, but she couldn't find the words to say in response to his questions. The answers are obvious. Lucian still can't bring himself to let go of Roxanne, and Essie has seen right through Aubrey's pretense long ago. My poor granddaughter suffered so much at Aubrey's hands for so long, and yet she couldn't even tell anyone about it. I've always been trying to get Essie to spend time with Aubrey, so it's only natural for her to dislike me. I feel so bad for her. Why did Lucian want you to call Aubrey just now? Elias pressed on when he received no response from her. Having been snapped out of her train of thought, Sonia replied reluctantly, He just wanted me to see Aubrey's true intentions. Tell me, have I been making a complete fool out of myself this whole time? Lucian is the only one who can decide who he marries. If you interfere, then he might end up marrying someone like Aubrey. Do you really want to put the Farwell family in the hands of a woman like that? Elias asked. Sonia simply snorted and kept quiet after that. Sonia opened her mouth, but she couldn't find the words to say in response to his questions. Roxanne glanced at the time after Sonia and Elias left. It's getting late. I should be heading back now. I can't rest easy knowing that the kids are home alone. I'll send you home, Lucian said with a frown. It was indeed rather late, and Aubrey's whereabouts were still unknown. It was possible that she would pop out of nowhere and try to take Roxanne's life. Lucian didn't feel safe letting Roxanne go home by herself. Roxanne knew he was worried about her safety, so she chose not to turn his offer down. Thanks. After getting into the car, the two of them talked about Aubrey as Lucian drove slowly toward Roxanne's house. I wonder where Aubrey is right now. I can't rest easy until she's behind bars. Roxanne mumbled with a worried look in her eyes while gazing at the scenery outside. Lucian slowed the car down a little as he reassured her. We have solid evidence against her, so the police won't let her get away with it. In the meantime, I will also do everything I can to find her. Until she is caught, I will have my men protect you and the kids in secret. Roxanne felt somewhat at ease when she recalled that Lucian had averted the recent crisis in time. Thanks. She also couldn't help but question her own ability to ensure the safety of her kids. Lucian's eyes dimmed when he saw the look of self-blame on her face. I should be apologizing to you. Aubrey wouldn't have targeted you and the kids if it weren't for me. I failed to protect you all before due to my negligence. Roxanne frowned and was about to say something when Lucian continued. From now on, I will increase the level of security around you and the kids. I'll also try to come up with more ways to keep you all safe. I just hope we can catch Aubrey as soon as possible. Hopefully, she'll repent her ways and change for the better after she's behind bars, Roxanne said. Lucian nodded, and the two of them continued chatting away. It was already 11 by the time they arrived at Roxanne's house. After spending the entire day working at the Research Institute and going through a roller coaster of emotions in the evening, Roxanne was extremely exhausted. As Lucian was driving really slowly, she got even sleepier along the drive and was barely awake when she got out of the car. Lucian tightened his hug when he noticed her response. Are you regretting it? It's really late. Be careful on your drive home, she reminded him while struggling to keep her eyes open. Feeling touched that Roxanne was still concerned about him even when she was so tired, Lucian reached out and gently caressed her face. What's wrong? Roxanne asked, staring at him in confusion. I think I might have been traumatized by the incident earlier this evening. I don't feel like letting you out of my sight, Lucian replied. Roxanne let out a chuckle when she heard that. Come on, stop joking. She couldn't seem to believe that Lucian would get traumatized by anything. The next thing she knew, Lucian had pulled her into his embrace. Unlike their hug outside the study, Lucian was being somewhat cautious when he hugged her this time. How much longer are you going to make me wait? Roxanne was about to hug him back, but she paused when she heard what he asked and nervously pulled her arms back. Lucian tightened his hug when he noticed her response. Are you regretting it? It's really late. Be careful on your drive home, she reminded him while struggling to keep her eyes open. Roxanne had a hesitant look in her eyes as she asked, I want to know what you think of Archie and Benny. Tell me honestly, did you only choose to accept them because of me? You know me. Except for Essie, I have no patience for kids in general. But things are different with Archie and Benny. I'm not sure if it's because they have your blood running through their veins, but I felt an odd sense of closeness with them the moment I first saw them, Lucian replied without any hesitation. He then released his grip on Roxanne as he continued. I was prepared to accept them the moment I first saw them. It's just as I said in the announcement. From now on, I will treat them as our children, which is no different from how I treat Essie. Roxanne felt a wave of melancholy sweep over her when she heard that. Lucian said he felt a sense of closeness with them because they're my children, but in reality, they're his children too. Who would have thought being related by blood would have such a strong effect on people? Lucian has been proving his words with the way he treats Archie and Benny. If Sonia can genuinely accept Archie and Benny into the family, then I will tell Lucian the truth about their identities. I will let him know that Archie and Benny are our children. Lucian had his arm around her waist as he observed the changes in her expression. While he couldn't tell what she was thinking, the firm yet gentle look in her eyes caused his heart to skip a beat. As Lucian slowly moved his hand up to her face, Roxanne went along with his movement and got closer to him. The sexual tension between them increased as the two of them got closer to each other. Their lips were about to touch when a childish voice called out to Roxanne from above. Mommy, you're back." Archie quickly held a hand over Benny's mouth to stop him from interrupting the kiss. He then grabbed Benny by the arm and tried to sneak back into the room so they could pretend nothing had ever happened. However, Roxanne had heard him and tensed up all of a sudden. Lucian frowned slightly as he tried to move in for a kiss, but Roxanne turned to the side at the last second, so he only managed to kiss her on the cheek. She then pushed him aside and shot him a glare in response. Lucian looked up at the balcony on the second floor and called out to the 3 kids who were about to sneak away, "It's really late. Why are you 3 still awake at this hour?" Roxanne had wanted to stop him, but it was too late. The kids stopped in their tracks when they heard his voice. After exchanging glances with each other, Benny decided to step forward and wave at them from the balcony. I didn't mean to stay up, Daddy. I just thought I'd greet Mommy since I heard her coming home. I didn't know you 2 came back together. I would have hidden in my room and pretended to be asleep if I had known." Of course, Lucian wasn't going to punish Benny or anything. He just wanted to show Roxanne that the kids knew everything. It's really late. You should go to bed. Don't go anywhere for the next few days," Lucian reminded them. The kids nodded profusely in response. Okay. We'll be going to bed now," Archie said as he casually led Benny and Estella back inside. Lucian said nothing further after watching the 3 of them leave the balcony. Roxanne, on the other hand, was burning bright red. "Lucian and I were just hugging the last time they caught us together. This time, they nearly caught us kissing." Roxanne shot Lucian another glare at the thought of that. It's really late. I thought they had all gone to bed," Lucian replied with an innocent look on his face. Roxanne felt speechless when she saw how calm he was about it. As you said, it's very late. I need to go to bed now. You should head home too, Mr. Farwell." Lucian had an affectionate look in his eyes when he saw her get flustered. Roxanne had just walked past him when he reached out and grabbed her by the wrist. He spun her around and gave her a quick kiss on the lips. Take good care of yourself. My phone will be switched on at all times, so just give me a call if anything happens," he said before letting go of her. Having been caught off guard by his sudden kiss, Roxanne only regained her composure a few seconds later. Whatever negative emotions she had were gone when she heard his deep and seductive voice. "You too. Stay safe on the drive home and let me know when you have arrived." Lucian nodded with a smile and waited until she entered the mansion before getting into his car. Roxanne watched as his car disappeared into the distance before returning to her room. She had just opened her bedroom door when she saw the 3 kids sitting on her bed. The kids turned around excitedly when they heard the door opening. Benny sounded a little disappointed when he asked, "Why did you come upstairs so soon, Mommy?" Roxanne knew what he was implying with that question of his, but she ignored it and responded by asking, "I'm the one asking the questions here. Why are you 3 still awake this late at night?" Unsure of what to say, the kids exchanged glances in silence. Eventually, Estella decided to speak up and replied with a pitiful look on her face. I couldn't sleep because you weren't home yet, so I had Archie and Benny keep me company." She then hopped off the bed and hugged Roxanne's thigh as she continued, "It's all my fault, Mommy. Please don't blame Archie and Benny." Okay." The kids nodded obediently in unison. Roxanne had always had a soft spot for Estella to begin with, and that spot only grew softer ever since she found out about Estella's identity. She patted Estella on the head and shifted her gaze toward Archie and Benny. "Oh, well, I have something to tell you kids anyway." The kids immediately sat up straight with serious looks on their faces. Not wanting to scare them, Roxanne tried her best to sound as calm as possible when she said, "I need you kids to behave yourselves and bring your smartwatches with you when you go to kindergarten. Also, stay with Ms. Ward after class is over. Do not leave the kindergarten until you see me. Is that understood?" The kids were pretty smart, So they knew something had happened after the incident earlier that evening, even if Roxanne didn't tell them. While they were still too young to be of any help, the best they could do was not make Roxanne and Lucian worry. Okay. The kids nodded obediently in unison. So? Have you come up with a plan, Aubrey? As time ticked past, Frida grew increasingly anxious. Aubrey recalled something right then and clenched her jaw forcefully. Have you investigated the man from that night? Frida's eyes turned as wide as saucers. You're going to ask for his help? Didn't you say he's in cahoots with Roxanne? What if he betrays you? Determination flashed across Aubrey's eyes. That's the only way. The man gave off an unusual aura, so I'm sure he's a powerful man. But why would someone like him work for Roxanne? Frida was filled with confusion. Did you investigate or not? Aubrey snapped, her patience wearing thin. Frida gave a hesitant nod. I checked the surveillance footage and tracked down his house. Bring me there, Aubrey said without hesitation. Seeing that she was so determined, Frida had no choice but to do as told. They hailed a taxi by the roadside, and Frida gave the driver the address of their destination. The vehicle slowly pulled away from the motel entrance. Soon, the taxi rolled to a stop in front of a mansion. This is it, but I'm not sure if he usually stays here, Frida said. Aubrey had no time to ponder her next move. She hastily flung open the car door and stepped out. The mansion was brightly lit. It was obvious it was occupied. Aubrey heaved a sigh of relief. However, her respite was brief. A moment later, her face twisted into a grimace and her gaze grew icy cold as she remembered why she was there. Frida stepped forward and rang the doorbell. Soon, someone answered the intercom. Who is it? Frida turned to look at Aubrey standing beside her. I'm looking for the owner of this mansion. Tell him that a woman with the surname Pearson is here to talk to him. He'll know who I am. Aubrey responded coolly. The person on the other end grunted in acknowledgement. A brief silence later, he said, the door is open. Come on in. Following that, the door to the mansion opened with a click. Aubrey strode in, her face devoid of expression. As soon as she stepped into the mansion, she saw the man lounging on the couch. Miss Pearson, why are you here late at night? Don't tell me you can't forget what happened that night. The man said flippantly, even though Frida had come with Aubrey. He stood up and came to Aubrey. Although the man wasn't as popular as Lucian, there were still people who would flatter him. She knew he could easily help Aubrey. What are you talking about? Hatred filled Aubrey's eyes. How dare you mention that night? If it wasn't for, I want to tear you into pieces for what you've done. Sean arched a brow in amusement. If it wasn't for what? If I'm not mistaken, that must be the reason for your visit, Miss Pearson. Am I right? Aubrey glared at him. I need your help to leave the country. Sean let out a derisive snort. It appears that you have come to seek my help. Miss Pearson, you may have been in a position of authority for an extended period of time, so I must remind you that this is not the appropriate way to request help. As he spoke, he swept his gaze over Frida. The Farwell family and the Pearson family have called off the engagement, but Miss Queen is still friends with Miss Pearson. How interesting. Frida met his gaze, and suddenly a vivid image flashed through her mind. A few years ago, Jonathan had brought her along to attend a national business conference, and she had met this man there. Aubrey clenched her fists by her sides, her nails digging into her palms. Who said I'm asking for your help? Don't you realize that I'm threatening you? Threatening me? The amused look in Sean's eyes intensified. I don't think you're capable enough to threaten me with your current status. Aubrey gritted her teeth. If you refuse to help me, I'll make a police report. You'll be sent to jail for what you did to me that night. The light-hearted smirk that had been on Sean's face moments earlier had vanished. His voice was low and menacing as he spoke. Or if I was scared of the consequences, I wouldn't have done what I did that night. Do you have anything to back up your claims? Anything that could possibly be used against me? Aubrey's lashes trembled imperceptibly when she heard that. Evidence? I was planning on using him, so I didn't leave any traces behind. Seeing her reaction, Sean continued, If you have nothing, I'd advise you to behave yourself. My interest in you was not due to any romantic inclination, but because of your prior relationship with Lucian. Had it not been for this connection, I doubt I would have found you particularly attractive. He held her chin with such force that her face contorted in pain. If you want my help, you will ask me politely. Don't give me any attitude, or you will regret coming here tonight. With that, Sean tossed her aside in disgust. Frida's heart sank when she saw his attitude doing 180. She glanced at Aubrey before suggesting tentatively, Aubrey, perhaps you should talk to him while I go and check on the status of the situation. With that, Sean tossed her aside in disgust. Without waiting for a reply, she rushed out hastily, afraid of inviting unwanted trouble. The butler entered his room at the same time. Aubrey and Sean were the only ones left in the living room. Aubrey was sprawled on the ground, looking wretched as Sean towered above her and looked at her as if she was nothing but a worthless piece of trash. Will you speak nicely now? He asked, his voice dripping with disdain. A while later, Aubrey struggled to her feet and hung her head low. She gritted her teeth and forced herself to speak softly. I'm willing to do anything as long as you agree to help me. Sean was filled with a sense of satisfaction as he watched the former influential socialite submit to him. You were discarded by Lucian like a piece of trash, but even so, your body is acceptable. Aubrey dug her nails into her palms fiercely. Her body tensed up when she heard him call her trash, and his insults stung her soul like 1,000 tiny needles. However, she reminded herself to stay put to achieve her goal. Sean was pleased to see the submissive side of her. Nonchalantly, he asked, Something serious must have happened for you to endure all my insults, Miss Pearson. If you are unwilling to divulge the details to me, how can I be of help? As he stopped coming closer to her, Aubrey allowed her grip to loosen and replied, I suspect Lucian has called the police to arrest me because of that batch. Please help me by sending me out of the country. She bit the inside of her mouth and pretended to be weak by pleading, I'm sorry for my attitude earlier. I promise I'll do whatever you say as long as I can escape the country safely. That batch? Sean repeated the way she addressed Roxanne in amusement. Aubrey's eyes widened in surprise as she considered the possibility that he was working together with Roxanne. She was afraid that she might have provoked him. Her heart sank to the pit of her stomach. He sounded her out by inching nearer to her. Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.